Obviously, there's quite a bit of news coverage going on today with regard to the recent mass shootings. And of course, our thoughts and our prayers are with the families, the victims of the families of the victims, and those communities which have been impacted by these events. And it isn't necessary to rehearse. I'm sure everyone who's watching is well aware of the conversation going on in the public discourse of this country regarding these events. But brother Imam, I wanted to get from you, what should Muslim leaders, in particular ones from our tradition, be offering in the way of understanding and solutions for this particular phenomenon in American society? And what should American leadership perhaps be more sensitive to when trying to address this particular problem?
This particular tragedy reflects in what we have or what we share as human beings fundamentally, and that is our original human form and the innocence that is associated with that form. An assault on children is an assault on human innocence. It is a crime against human innocence. And this is for me, as I reflect upon the conditions that exist now in the United States of America, I am associating these behaviors in the context of a open assault on the fundamental human life. That is the fundamental human form, fundamental human purpose, fundamental human design, and fundamental human innocence. It is the human innocence that was targeted by the enemy of man. His complaint was that he was created of fire, and that the man was created from mud. And right away, he's identifying himself as of a superior creation and making an argument to build a strategy to weaken or to separate man from his form by questioning his form, by questioning his design, by questioning his origin, and thus questioning the role of his innocence. It is man's innocence that brings him eventually to guidance from God. Without that innocence, man will take on the behavior and attitude of the enemy and be arrogant and turn away from God's guidance. And this is the strategy of the enemy of man. So there's healing for us as long as we register in our hearts, in our souls, the crime against innocence. There's hope for us as a human society, and hope for us as Americans. But as I was watching the reports, and I don't listen to them continually. I'm not able to listen to them continually. I don't want to know all the details. I understand the problem, I don't want to know all the details. Because to know all the details further is a further assault on the innocence. As I was watching the report just to know how things were proceeding, I listened to the mayor of Houston, Texas, who his city was hosting a convention of the National Rifle Association. And he said something that caught my attention. He said, there is the concern, there is the concern or the matter of decency, the matter of decency. And he was addressing the decision of the leaders of the National Rifle Association to go ahead with their convention in Houston under the condition and the circumstances of the tragedy in that small town, that the decency of such persons has to be called into question. And so when we look at this problem and we see it manifest in various ways, the question of decency is also a discussion on the role of innocence in the life of man. So how do we address this? First, we have to put our attention on the importance of innocence and the necessity to protect that innocence. And we don't do that with guns. We can't protect innocence with a weapon. It's not to be protected with weapons. It's to be protected by a kind of consciousness and a respect for the sentimental nature of man. There has to be in the heart of man a sense for mercy. And if such occurrences don't draw from your eyes or your heart tears of concern, then you have been desensitized to the human life. And this is the issue. It's not to be reacquired by arming yourself. That might be something that someone calls out and says, this is something we have to address. We have to address the proliferation of weapons. That's not untrue, that's true. But that's related to a respect for human life, a respect for human life. So the kind of regard that we should have for human existence is the first matter that has to be addressed. And Islam puts us in a position where we value that human existence, that we understand it in its purpose, in its role, and we value, in that context, we value the fact that it's not possible for us to come into the existence that God intended without his mercy and without his guidance. And that is what I'm emphasizing. And if the Imams are well-intentioned and living up to the standard of Islamic decency, then that's what they will be emphasizing too. I want to say something else too with regard to this. I read something very disturbing some time ago, coming from an imam in our group, in our association. I saw where he was advocating arming yourself. But I said to him, you a person who belonged to the following of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And you were an officer in that order. And it was well known that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did not permit his followers to arm themselves. And it was based upon a reasoning. It was based upon a reasoning, a public logic. And that public logic was that whatever enemy that the members of the Nation of Islam or the Temple of Islam were threatened with, that they would be protected by God himself. And of course, this is practical teaching, but also symbolic teaching. And I would argue that this teaching of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was out of respect for the dignity of man that God has given man, and that it's not necessary to take into your spirit and your regard for your human identity the need to have a physical weapon that will guarantee for you your human identity. In other words, a person carrying a gun or wanting to carry a gun becomes that gun. They become that weapon, and they transform from a human being to a gun. That's who they are. And even the way that they walk and talk will change according to the symmetry of their human form will be imbalanced, and they have to balance themselves according to the weight of the gun on their person. I know this is symbolic and maybe above some person's understanding of what I'm saying, but our balance and our symmetry is based upon what Allah created. And so we have to respect that, and that spirit in us will bring us to a condition in the consciousness of the American people and citizenry of America will come to a consciousness that we don't need weapons to push back on this. We just need to have the spirit to respect human innocence. And we won't permit such things to happen, even if it means, and I know that this will be somewhat controversial, what I'm saying, what I'm going to say, but even if it means that purveyors of the notion that we should be armed, and purveyors of the notion that the only way to solve this problem is by arming ourselves, that war be made upon them. A war of conscience. So what is important here is to put in focus the sanctity of the human individual. And it is manifest to us in the lives of children.